Okay, thank you for joining me here on our live Q&A that I do every single week, answering your real estate questions and trying to get to the bottom of your challenges and just work through them and try to get you past that so you can move on to the next thing. I know sometimes when we kind of encounter a challenge in our business, it's easy to get kind of stuck and stop and like, well, I got to figure this out and I'll figure it out and then I'll keep, making offers and I'll keep doing stuff and moving forward. But that doesn't help you move forward. That doesn't help you get anywhere. You can't stop. You have to keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other in this business and in life, really, if you want to get any progress. So I do this on Wednesdays. You guys can log on live, ask me anything you want about real estate. You can ask me anything you want, period. But we're kind of focusing on real estate business and growth and scaling that up and getting through those challenges. So you can log on here, ask me anything you want, and we'll talk through it. You can ask follow up questions. You can do all of that if you are here live. If you're listening to this on replay, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're watching this on replay, maybe you're listening to it on my podcast. That's great too, because you can get answers to questions you might not even have thought of, right? Things that, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what you don't know sometimes. So when people ask questions, it can be really, really helpful because they're asking questions that you haven't encountered yet. But when you get there, you'll know, oh, I remember they asked this question on the Q&A and this was the answer, and I can just move forward with it. And you don't have to slow down and stop. So the idea here is momentum. Keep it going forward and keep you pushing and growing and getting better and better in your business. So that's what we're here to do. To that end, guys, I have created for you, because one of the biggest questions I get on this Q&A, I get it over and over again, I've answered it quite a few times, is I'm having trouble getting leads. I've tried direct mail. It's not working for me. Or what do you do with direct mail? And I've spent a lot of time and a lot of money on direct mail. And I've had a ton of success. And so I've learned a lot over that period of time, spending over $1 million on postcards specifically. And I put together a mini video course that shows you exactly step by step what I do for my direct mail, what my card looks like, why I use that card, why it works, what aspects of it are the most effective. Like, why did I assemble the card this way? And then how do I go about getting it printed, getting it shipped? How much should you pay? What happens when you get it sent out? People start calling you. How do you handle that? Like, all of my direct mail process I've put into this mini course that is very powerful and will answer, I think, all of your questions on direct mail. It should. I even show you how I pull my lists, like where I pull them from, what's my criteria, what kind of list do I pull, how do I find motivated sellers, all of that stuff. It's all in there, and you can find it if you go to mikesimmons.com/winning direct mail. That's mikesimmons.com/winning direct mail. It's on the screen right now. Excuse me, if you're watching. So you can just take that down or write it down or whatever. But it's mikesimmons.com/winning direct mail. Go there. I have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy making that very comprehensive so that it answers all of your questions and you can run a successful direct mail marketing campaign after watching that and get the same results or similar results that I got. Okay, let's dive into the questions for today and see what we got. Remember, you can, if you're not here live, you can DM me, you can email me at mike@juststartrealestate.com if you want to ask questions that get onto this Q&A. If you can't show up live, but you have questions for me, you can send them to me, email, you can DM me on Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want to do, and we'll get them into this live Q&A. Okay, first question. If or when a recession hits, will wholesaling get easier or harder? How do you change your process in this economic situation? Okay, wholesaling will not get easier or harder. And that may be a controversial answer. Maybe people disagree with me, but I'm right. It will not get easier or harder. Now, as a whole, it won't get easier or harder. Aspects of wholesaling will get easier or harder, right? There's always the market. I say this all the time, and you really, please take this to heart. Please listen to me. The market is never good or bad. Okay. The market is what it is. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have emotions. The market isn't trying to hurt you. The market isn't spiteful. It just is what it is. And sometimes it's a seller's market, just to kind of, there's a lot, it's more complex, right? But in general, real estate, we talk about sellers and buyers markets. And then, so there's sellers market and a buyer's market, and then there's transitions between each of those. So right now we're in a seller's market. They say, people say, experts say, some of my colleagues and people that I know say that we are transitioning right now. We're not just in a pure top of the seller's market. We're actually transitioning and we're heading toward what they think is going to be a buyer's market. They may or may not be right. But in either case, we know that it's more, we're closer to a seller's market than a buyer's market for sure. Okay. So we're basically in a seller's market right now, which makes for wholesaling specifically, and a lot of other kinds of real estate, it's harder to buy houses overall in general. It's a little harder to buy houses right now. So buying as for a wholesaler to kind of address this question directly, buying houses is harder in a seller's market because house prices are high. Sellers have a lot of confidence about what their house is worth, and they are trying to maximize that, and they know that houses are selling for a lot right now, and so it's harder to get them at the kind of discounts that we like to get them at as investors in a seller's market, because everyone is trying to get a ton of money. And sometimes, a lot of times, when you're in a seller's market, sellers have an overinflated idea of what their house is worth. In other words, they think it's worth more than it actually is. Even though it's worth a lot more than it was 3 or 4 years ago, they think it's worth even more than it actually is, right? So everyone's sort of got big dollar signs in their eyes when it comes to their houses. So it makes it a little harder to buy houses. However, it's a lot easier to sell houses in the market that we're in right now, because we get that house under contract with a seller. We're able to find that at a discount, let's say. When we go to our buyer pool and we send this out to our buyers in an email or however you do it, our buyers are dying for deals because they're struggling to find deals because it's just a little bit tougher, and wholesalers and the MLS and everybody doesn't have as many good deals available to them. So we have this rabid, super eager, desperate almost buyer pool. They want to buy houses. And so once we get something under contract, it's really, really easy to sell houses. And we're selling them for a lot more than we could have 3 or 4 years ago because prices are up, right? So everyone sort of has to, that high price point kind of gets pushed along. So it's easy to sell houses as an investor to my buyers as a wholesaler. It's harder to buy them from the homeowners because house prices, right? But when things switch, and what you called it is when the recession hits, okay? When the recession hits, if it affects house prices significantly and house prices go down, which it could, I don't think we're going to crash like we did in '08. I really don't. And I've talked to a lot of experts who also do not think it's going to crash like '08. I don't think it will. I don't see why it would. But when the house prices inevitably do go down a bit, we'll be in more of a buyer's market, meaning sellers, as it's starting to go down, will start getting a little bit desperate to sell their house uh, quickly because they're afraid of losing more and more and more value. And so it gets a little easier to buy houses. But as house prices are going down, now my buyers, which are house flippers and landlords, they get a little bit nervous because they don't want to buy a house at, let's say, $100,000 today, thinking it's going to be worth 150 when they renovate it. But as house prices are going down, they have to consider that declining value and say, oh, if I buy it for 100 now because I think it's worth 150 fixed up, what happens in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months when I'm done if it's only worth 120 and I put 25 into it, right? Like, so they are worried that house prices are going to decline faster than they can get them renovated and sold, which means they're more hesitant to buy, their offers become lower. And so the selling side as a wholesaler, like selling to buyers, becomes a little bit more challenging. So when the cycles change, right? Recession or not a recession, we're talking in real estate about sellers and buyers market and then the transition periods in between. So as we're transitioning from that seller's market to a buyer's market, it gets a little more challenging to sell these properties or assign them to our end buyer because they're a little nervous, just like homeowners are nervous. And that's why it's a little easier to buy from the homeowner in a buyer's market because they're afraid of declining values too. And they try to oftentimes sell them quickly and get out from underneath them. And they're afraid. And, a lot of the media drives a lot of this too. And so the media, what I have found typically when it comes to real estate, whatever, as an investor, by the way, whatever the media says, you can almost guarantee the opposite is true for an investor. And this gets people kind of tripped up too, like friends and family who don't really understand exactly what I do as a wholesaler. They think right now they'll go, "Wow, the market's really really great. You must be killing it." And it's like, "Yeah, kind of. I'm not a realtor though, so it's not I don't have the same situation a realtor has where everyone wants to sell their house because house prices are really high and that's all great. For an investor, it's more challenging for me to buy houses right now." And so the answer is always yes and no when people ask me if the market's good. I mean, the market's, like I said before, the market isn't good or bad, but as it relates to me, is the market making it harder or easier for me? The answer is always twofold. It's always harder and easier. It's either harder on the purchase side for me and easier on the sell side, or the other way around. It's harder on the or easier on the purchase side and harder on the sell side. Or I don't know if I just said the same thing twice, but you get what I'm saying. It's going to be easy on one end and hard on the other, almost always. Sometimes when you're in a transitioning market, it kind of balances out a little bit where it's just as easy to buy and sell because we're sort of in between. But when you're in that buyer's market or seller's market, one side of my business is always easier and harder. And it just depends on which market we're in, which is which. And, do I change my process when the market changes? Absolutely. You have to change, not necessarily your process, but you have to change the conversations that you're having with buyers and sellers. So when we go into a buyer's home now, we can't say to them, "Hey, your value is dropping. And, in 6 months from now, the value of your house could be significantly less than it is now." Nobody thinks that right now, at least not in the public. They don't think that, right? We as investors might say, "Hey, it's cooling off," or, prices are leveling out. That may be true, but right now, I don't think that the population at large, the entire population believes that house prices are declining because the media is not saying it really yet. So it's hard to go into a home and say, "Hey, we want to buy your house. We can pay you X. We think that's a good price. In 3 months from now, it may be a lot less." We can't say that because that's not what's being told to everyone, right? So no one would believe that. But in 6 months or a year, if a recession does hit and we do see declining house prices, then the conversation changes to, "Hey, Mr. Homeowner, I know you're a little hesitant to take my offer. It's a little lower than you thought. I get that. But if you decide not to sell to me, that's totally fine. It's your decision, and I respect that. And you should always, do what's best for you and your family. However, I'm just telling you that in 3 months or in 6 months, if you call me back and you want me to buy the house, I may not be able to offer you this price because house prices are declining," right? That's the conversation you have in a declining or a market that's sort of bottoming out. That's the conversation you have. You can't have that conversation now. And so, yeah, we don't change our process because our core process is essentially the same, but some of the strategies and some of the conversations that we're having with sellers is going to change dramatically. Same thing on the buyer side. Right now, buyers are calling my company saying, "Do you have properties for me? I want to look at anything. Like, I'm desperate. I need properties. Show me what you got. Like, please send me anything you have. I'll buy it. I need it." Right? That's the conversations we're having with buyers. But when things are going the other way, we might have to do more outreach and say, "Hey, Mr. Buyer or wholesaler, I mean, sorry, Mr. Flipper or landlord, hey, we've got properties. I don't know if you saw them." And they might say, "Oh, yeah, we saw them, but we're kind of overloaded. We have too much right now." Like, that's what happens when the market reverses. We get the opposite of what we have right now. Right now, I have desperate buyers. When the market flips, we might have buyers that just have too many deals on their hands and they can't finance them all, or they don't have enough, crews to run renovations or whatever it is. So it becomes a little bit more challenging to sell properties that are under contract than it is right now. So the process doesn't change, but your talking points or your conversations or the way that you approach buyers and sellers changes with the market. But don't be afraid. Like, whether we're in a seller's market or a buyer's market, it doesn't matter. Now's the time to get in, right? And I'll say that in 5 years. I'll say it in 5 months. I said it 5 years ago, and I'll say it now. now's the time to get in, right? There's never a better time than right now. You just have to understand where you are in the market cycle so that you can make appropriate decisions and have the appropriate conversations with buyers and sellers. Okay, let's go to the next question. I'm going to take a drink here. I'm clearing my throat, obviously. Okay, next question. I finally have some cash to buy my first out of state short term rental, but I have a bad case of analysis paralysis. How can I push through it to get started? Okay. This is pretty common. I went through this too. I had analysis paralysis. A lot of people go through it. It's fear, right? We call it analysis paralysis, and it sounds maybe a little bit less um, of a bummer to call it analysis paralysis because analysis is a good thing. Paralysis is not, but at least we're paralyzed by doing analysis, right? Analysis sounds very responsible. What this is you're paralyzed by fear. So it should be called fear paralysis because that's really what it is. If you know your numbers, okay, you're analyzing these short-term rentals and you're looking at, vacancies and the cost per night that you can charge and the seasonality if there is a significant seasonality to the property that you're looking at. Like once you look at all the factors and you compare it to all the other short-term rentals in the area that are similar to yours, what are they charging? How often are they booked? Like you look at all these factors, if just trust your numbers. If the numbers make sense, then you move forward, right? Paralysis analysis implies that you're looking at the numbers and they're clearly telling you that you should do it. And you're just saying in your own mind, yeah, but what if I'm wrong? What if the numbers are wrong? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if we have a recession, right? What if consumer opinions about short-term rentals change? What if laws or regulations in this area like I understand what you're being paralyzed by, but if the numbers make sense and you've done your due diligence, trust your numbers and move forward. Some people have the opposite of paralysis analysis. They don't seem to understand that it's a bad deal when the numbers are telling it's a bad deal. They talk themselves into it because they want to do it so bad. That's the other end of the spectrum. And that's bad too, because you end up with bad deals. But if you have analysis paralysis and you run your numbers and you can see that it's a good deal, the returns are good, the vacancies are good, the cost per night makes sense, all this stuff, if it looks like a good deal, you have to pull the trigger, right? Nothing is ever accomplished by waiting. Nothing gets done by waiting. Empires were not built by, people who sat around and waited for the optimal situation that never comes. There will always be a reason to not move forward, to not do something, to not start your business, to not buy that short-term rental. There will always be a reason. I know people who it seems like their entire life is defined by having something they want to do, creating an arbitrary time in the future when they're going to actually start doing it. One that once that time gets closer, they move the line. They just keep moving the line. And you probably know people who have done this. I'm going to start working out. Let's just say right now, as we sit here and as this is being recorded, it is July of 2022. And people who will say, well, I'm going to wait until um, after school starts, right? Right now, kids are on vacation. We're kind of going places and I can't eat well and I'm not going to be at home to work out. And so I'll start in September when school starts. And then September starts. It's like, kids are back to school. It's really hectic. I've got all these different like sports practices I'm taking to my kids to. And whatever. And then it's like, okay, I'll wait till all that comes down. And then it's like, well, Thanksgiving's coming up and I'm going to eat terrible Thanksgiving. So I'll wait till after Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, it's Christmas and New Year. And then it's Easter. And then, the summer's coming and then summer we're too busy. Right. And it's like, they have this perpetual line in the sand that they just keep moving and making excuses and they never do it. People do the same thing with business. And you could be doing the same thing here with the short-term rentals. You're putting up walls and you're over analyzing to try to keep yourself safe. It's sort of like your body's natural tendency to want to protect itself. It's self-preservation. You're creating this over analyzing, kind of a thing in your head, because if you don't pull the trigger and buy that short-term rental, you can't make a mistake and you can't, lose money or feel stupid or whatever it is that you're worried about. It can't happen if you don't pull the trigger. But the other thing that can't happen if you don't pull the trigger is you can't reach your goals. You can't create that supplementary income or the income that you're trying to create to get you out of your 9 to 5. You can't do any of that if you don't pull the trigger. So, here's what I say to answer your question, right? You have the money, you're doing your analysis. If the numbers, you just have to create like whatever analysis you're doing, create a benchmark. If it hits this or better, I will do it. And if you find a property that hits all those benchmarks, you have to do it. At some point you just have to pull the trigger. At some point you have to take that leap of faith, and it's not even really a leap of faith. A leap of faith implies you just don't know what's going to happen, right? In this case, you're doing analysis, right? Real estate, the great thing about real estate is there are lots of data that will help us determine, like statistically, mathematically, factually, whether or not what we're about to do makes sense and will be successful. It's not just closing your eyes and jumping and hoping for the best. You have data to back you up. Trust your data. Once you have a property that meets your minimum criteria, then do it. That's my advice. Like Nike says, just do it. Or like I say on my podcast, just start. Like, do it. Buy it. If it meets your criteria, buy it. Quit over analyzing. Don't over engineer this thing. Like, if it meets your criteria, do it and move on to the next one. Okay, next question. Okay, this is a different one, so bear with me. I had to read this a couple times. Okay, the question says, answer this. If I could walk away with X years of my current annual cash flow, it would be worth it for me to sell my portfolio now. This is this is an interesting question, and it's highly personal and highly like depends on you kind of a thing. There's no way I can really answer this um with just like, hey, this is it, right? Because if I say, and I get the question, right? If you sell your portfolio, and let's just say we'll put numbers into this. Let's just say your portfolio nets you $10,000 a year. What the question is, how many years of profit would I have to be able to get if I sold my portfolio now to make it worth it? In other words, if I make $10,000 a year on my portfolio net, and I could sell it for $50,000, my whole portfolio, and net $50,000, that would be 5 years worth of cash flow. How many is that worth it? Like, is 5 years enough? Would I have to sell it for a net $100,000 profit, which would be 10 years of cash flow? Like, I don't know. It's hard to say, right? It's hard. It depends. What are you going to do with the money when you sell it? If you're going to reinvest that money and you sell it into something more profitable, then I say it doesn't, you could do it for 1 year's worth of net cash flow or no year's worth. Just get out from under it and get your money back. In other words, if you're making 8% on your portfolio right now, you've got whatever money you got into it, and that money gives you an 8% return annually. If I could sell that portfolio and put the money that I had invested in the portfolio into something that netted me 10% or 12%, I would do it without any net profit above and beyond what I have into it, because I know day one I'm making more money on it, right? So why wouldn't I do that? But if you're saying you're cashing out and you're just going to hold on to that money and live on it, again, how old are you? Are you 80? Then I don't know, maybe do it if you could just make 2 or 3 times your annual cash flow or 5 times your annual cash flow, like then it would be worth it. Are you 25 and you're not going to reinvest the money? Then, you better make 20, 30, 50 times your annual, you know what I'm saying? So there's 100 ways you could slice this, but if you're going to take that money and cash out of your portfolio and you're going to reinvest it in something that makes you as much or hopefully more return on that money, then it doesn't matter. Get it out and reinvest it into something more profitable. If you're just going to live on it and coast, then it's totally up to you. I don't know. The other thing is, do you make $1 million annual cash flow? Well, maybe you don't have to make that many times your annual cash flow for it to make sense. Maybe you only have to make 2 or 3 times your annual cash flow for it to make some sense to you. So it's kind of an impossible question to ask or answer for me, unfortunately. Certainly without knowing more about what are you going to do with the money and how old are you? Those are key questions. Like, I need to know how long this money has to last you. Or if you're like, hey, I'm going to take it out of this portfolio, I'm going to cash out of it. I make 8% annually on my portfolio, but I'm going to put it into this investment and make 15%. Like, you don't have to make any number of times the cash flow and profit to get it out. I say get it out now, because you're way upping your returns by going with the new investment. So, tough question. That's a tough one. I've never been asked that before. But this is where live questions would make sense, because I, if you were live asking me this question, I would probably have we would bounce back and forth 3 or 4 times that I would ask you things in order to get to the bottom of the best answer. But I say it really depends on how old you are and what you're going to do with that money when it comes out. All right. Let's try one more. One more question. Last question. I hate to generalize, but I'm really struggling to manage my millennial aged team members. They complain about everything and aren't willing to put the time in. Thoughts? Okay, so you're managing millennial aged people, and you're struggling. You say you hate to generalize, but you are generalizing, but that's fine. It's okay. Well, I'll answer the question. It's not an unfair question, and it's not something I've never heard. I've answered this question in a different way before, but here's my general take on this. Every generation has slightly different values, slightly different motivating factors in the workplace, um, different attitudes, different values in the way that they just kind of like conduct their life. So millennials are no different, right? I'm not a millennial. Um, I'm a Gen Xer basically. So millennials are different. They probably require, no, not probably. They do. I don't want to be like a weak answer here because it's true. They do require a different kind of management. But my like 10,000-foot view, or my overarching response to this kind of a question is, if you have a group of employees, whether they're from the same generation or not, if you have a group of employees who are not responding to your management, then that's on you. You have to alter your management methods, your management style, your communication method, your communication style, to find out what's effective for them. Now, one employee who happens to be a millennial, who has, complaints about everything and aren't willing to put time in, that could be a one person thing. You have one bad apple that you have to deal with. And that can happen, and that is not necessarily on you. That could just be them, right? And maybe you could, change your methods and kind of appeal to that person a little more effectively. But at the end of the day, if I have one person in my entire team and they're always complaining and they never work, like, we might just have to get rid of that person. They're just not a good fit. But if you have a group or more than one person who all of them complain and none of them want to work, you have a workplace problem that is your problem as the manager. And I hate to say that, but that's just the reality of it. There's a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink that I would highly encourage that you read. Uh, and it is exactly what the title suggests. It's extreme ownership, meaning you as the manager, you as the person who's leading the team, you have to take ownership of everything that's going on, specifically the things that aren't going well. So it sort of goes back to that old cliche, is everybody wrong or are you wrong? And my guess is that you manage people who are not millennials and you're not having these problems with them. Okay. So to be fair to you, my guess is you have a successful management style and communication style that works with older team members or people who are not millennials. It works with them. And so you're looking at the millennials saying, what's wrong with you guys? And it's not necessarily what's wrong with them. Certainly, if it's like more than one, if we're talking two, three, four, five, 10 people, like it's not them, it's you. And you have to learn how to manage different people, different groups, certainly, sometimes a little bit differently. It doesn't have to be unfair. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you just give them a bunch of stuff that you don't give other people. But you'll find that different age groups, and like I said, millennials have their own, set of values and things that they think are important, that motivate them, and find out what motivates them and work toward that a little bit better. So I have managed millennials, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been frustrated at times too. I have watched that. I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, but Simon Sinek did a talk, or a part of his talk one time, on millennials and managing millennials. I would highly suggest you go and search that out. Just type in Simon Sinek millennials and you'll find it. It's very popular. Really, really well done talk about how to work and motivate and just interact with millennials in the workplace. Um, they're not broken. They just see things differently than you do, and they have different things that motivate them. Like my generation was typically motivated by money. You offer them more money, they'll jump through hoops for you. They'll jump through fiery hoops. Like you just pay us and we're good. That's all we want out of our job, is to get paid really, really well. And getting paid well makes us feel appreciated. Some age groups, and certainly the younger generations, it's not that. It's not, pay isn't even the primary concern for them. Sometimes the primary concern is freedom, autonomy, working from home, like remote working, right? Being able to travel and work at the same time. Like that is a much higher priority for younger generations than it was for my generation. My generation that we never thought that we didn't have to go into an office. We knew we had to go into an office to do our job, or into a factory, or into the workplace, whatever it was. There was no remote working, so it wasn't a thing. So we didn't expect it. We didn't ask for it. Well, it's a thing. Certainly after COVID, it's a thing. People realize it. And there's a lot of people, and I suspect a lot of younger generations, that are not willing to go back to work now because they've gotten a taste of working from home and having that freedom to work from anywhere. And they want that. And so you may just have to find out what and I'm just kind of doing air quotes and being general here, the millennials that you're managing. What is their major problem? Like what is it that they want? What would make them happy and feel appreciated and feel challenged and feel heard and feel like they're important and valuable to the company? And younger generations really put a higher value on, like I said, autonomy, working remotely, working for a company that has a clear and admirable or honorable mission statement, something that they can get behind and be proud of. When I started working, I didn't even know what my companies stood for necessarily. I knew what we did, but there was nothing. I didn't really care why they did it. Like I just went in, I got paid, I did this job, I got good at the job, I performed it from 9 to 5, and then I went home. Increasingly, employees in the workforce wants to know, what do we do that's good? Like what do we do that I can be proud of, that I can get behind, that I can champion that cause, right? And there's a lot of companies out there now that donate a portion of their profits or whatever. They're just doing things for the community, for the world. They're trying to make things better. And a lot of people, younger generations specifically, really love that message, and they love that positioning, and they love working for a company that has a mission statement and a purpose that's beyond making money, that they can get behind. So I'm not saying that that necessarily fits with what you're doing or your business or your company, but in the real estate world, like for example, I am owner of Seven Figure Flipping. It's a real estate mastermind, and Seven Figure Flipping recently started a charitable arm, uh, that we went out over in April, right after Easter, and we went to Mexico in the Cancun area, the Yucatan Peninsula, and we built houses. Right, it's a charity that we developed, and that people could go and donate time and money to go and build houses for super super impoverished areas of Mexico, and so that is something people can get behind. They can say, "Okay, you guys are this mastermind and you teach people how to make money." And, it's very money focused and it's community focused, but it's like, "Hey, we're trying to build businesses that are successful and profitable, right? But we also care about our world that we live in. And so we're going to go and build houses and donate money and time and try to completely change the lives of these folks that we were building houses for in Mexico." Like, building those houses for them was really the equivalent here in America of winning the lottery, right? We think if we win $50 million, dollars, that would change our life forever and our kids' lives and generations to come. Building a house for someone who has nowhere to live and no way of getting somewhere to live and will never make enough money to buy or build their own house, giving them a house for free was basically the equivalent of them winning $50 million. It changed their life forever. It changed their kids' life and it changed generations to come life, right? So having a mission that you can get behind, or a purpose or a cause or something that you do, a lot of times will highly appeal to millennials, to Generation Y, Generation Z, and whatever generation we're employing and going into the workforce now. It's going to appeal to them. So figure out what motivates them, what turns them on, what makes them happy, what makes them excited to come into work, and try to figure that out so that you can manage. Because the fact of the matter is, whether you're struggling to manage millennials or not, they're here and they are of working age and they are the ones that are going to be running our country soon. So you as the manager, you have to adapt and figure out what it is that you're doing that's not working for them and fix it, right? Take extreme ownership of the situation. As a manager, you can't say all the employees are wrong and I'm right. It just doesn't work that way. That's not reality. They have a point, they have a point of view. And if you're going to manage them effectively, you can't just say, "Hey, I pay you, do your work and shut up." Like, you can, but they'll leave, right? And so as a manager, you really need to adapt and grow and become a better leader of men and women to make that transition between your generation, whatever that is, and the generation that's there now that you have to manage. All right, guys, that's it for me. Like I said, listen, go and grab my free video course. It's totally free. You can't beat that. I have made so much money with direct mail. I know you guys are struggling to find deals, especially in the seller's market, like we talked about earlier. If you go to my website, mikesimmons.com/winning direct mail, or go to mikesimmons.com on the home page, it says free video course. Get my free video course. Just click the button, get the course, watch it, start doing direct mail, start getting those leads, build your business. Okay, guys, we'll see you next time.